Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, episode 73, The Power of Presence in Pleasure. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. I am so excited for you guys to listen to this interview. Dr. Chelom Leavitt is a powerhouse, and she talks about mindfulness in such a beautiful way. And oftentimes we think of mindfulness and we're just thinking about meditation, but you do not want to miss this interview because Dr. Leavitt is able to express how mindfulness is actually a key to unlocking the deep connection that we desire in our sex life, and how being mindful, how being present, and how acknowledging what we're feeling in our bodies and bringing that into our sexual relationship and talking about it with our spouse opens up the door for deeper connection and allows us to invite healing, connection, all of the things that we want in our relationship. Dr. Chelom E. Leavitt is an associate professor in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University. She received her PhD at Penn State. Her research focuses on committed sexual relationships, gender, mindfulness, and religion. She has published in the top journals in sexuality and blogs for Psychology Today. She is particularly interested in how mindfulness benefits couples within sexual relationships. She also teaches a sexual mindfulness course for couples. Before jumping in, I just wanted to make sure that you knew about my new freebie I recently created. Your sex life has so much potential to bring healing, to bring power into your relationship. But the only way for it to do that is if sex is deeply connecting. And so I created a new freebie just for you to help you and your husband start to create the fulfilling and deeply connecting sex life that you deserve and that you desire. So go to ladiestalkinglove.com/connect and download my new freebie, Create a Deeply Connecting Sex Life, to help you and your spouse start to work through how you can create a deeply connecting sex life that binds you together, empowers you, and helps you receive the love and meaning that you want in your sex life. But without further ado, let's talk love. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Chelom Leavitt back onto Ladies Talking Love. Thanks so much for joining me, Chelom.
Thank you, Ariel. This is really a pleasure for me.
Oh, it is always so fun to have you on. You've already done a couple episodes with us, and I'm so excited to dive in more because you are like the queen of mindfulness and so many great thoughts and insights in sexuality, and then bringing mindfulness into sexuality. I love learning from you. So I'm excited to dive in. We're going to talk about using mindfulness to kind of overcome some of the frequent barriers that especially women have as we're like trying to be present in sexuality. So could you start off by just talking a little bit about what are some of those common barriers that we face?
Well, let me get a little research geeky here for a minute. When I was first starting to investigate mindfulness within a sexual context, I first just measured how mindful people were during sex. And I was really disappointed to learn that women struggle to be mindful in sex, whereas men are a little more mindful. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, this makes sense. Men kind of compartmentalize activities in their life where women are far more integrated. We're thinking about our children while we're washing the dishes or doing projects. And so women, of course, are going to struggle to be mindful during sex because we're also thinking about what other things do I have to get done? Has everybody been taken care of? This is one thing. Men can learn lots of things from women, but this is one thing that we can learn from men, that there are times in our life where it's really healthy for us to set everything aside and take a little me time, take a little us time. And so, sex is one of those things where, if possible, kind of arrange your day so that you can be a little more present in your body, in your head during this time where we're trying to be intimate, create that connection, feel that pleasure of creating this strong bond with our spouse. So it is a challenge, but there are many ways that we can overcome some of these natural tendencies we have. One is to start meditating outside of sex. Take a little time, even if it's 2 minutes. If I can slow my mind down for 2 minutes, that gives me a little practice for how I can then apply that in sex.
I have totally found that in my own life. Just taking a couple seconds in the shower to feel
Yeah.
the water on my body, or when I'm snuggling my baby or holding my child's hand, stop and be like, okay, just feel this. And that has really helped me to be more mindful outside of sex, but then to bring that into my sexual encounter as well, to be able to focus. You mentioned that men are naturally more mindful. What are some ways that we as women can learn from men in this way? Like, how can we have our spouse or partner kind of help us with this?
Those are two really good questions. Well, what's interesting is research shows that men think of themselves far more than women do. There's this kind of prevailing attitude that men think about sex more than women do. It's true, they do, because it's pleasurable. We desire that connection. But men also think about eating more than women do if they're hungry or that they're thirsty, and they actually pay attention to that. There are some times where I will go a couple of hours and I'm like, oh, I needed to go to the bathroom 2 hours ago. And I keep putting it off because somebody needs something. So women are far more likely to put themselves fifth, sixth, seventh down on the priority list when there are times where that's just not healthy.
Yeah.
And we need to do some self care. And one way that men can help with that is recognize that probably you have a pretty sacrificing wife and you need to encourage her to take a little me time. And I love that you brought up this idea of taking a shower and just feeling the warmth of that water on you. Taking a shower, taking a bath, taking a little time that helps us slow down and actually connect with our body. Women are so disconnected from their body often, where women can actually be feeling some pain or have a headache or, some sort of nagging problem, and they just keep tamping it down or ignoring it. And that's not healthy. Women need to understand we need to have some self-care. We need to actually address some of these issues. As we do this, as we slow down and are aware of what our body is telling us, we can also be more aware of our own sexual desire. Too often, women have this disconnect between their head and their body. And so we may be feeling a sense of, yes, I'm longing, like I have that physical longing to be connected with my partner. But again, we ignore it. We disconnect from that. Giving ourselves a little time, and it doesn't have to be one more to-do list. We can do it while we're holding a baby. We can do it while we're washing the dishes. Do we just slow our head down and say, how am I feeling at this moment? How's my body feeling? How's my head feeling? How am I experiencing life at this moment?
Oh, I love that. And I love how you talked about it can be in the moment of things that we're already doing
Yes.
throughout the day. And I found that too in sexual encounters, having my husband help me. Sometimes I'll ask him, tell me what you're feeling. And he'll list what he's feeling in his body. And it helps me slow down and be like, what am I feeling in my body? And so I think that is so powerful to just take a minute to slow down and think,
Yes.
because my mind's going everywhere so often that
Yeah.
just that slowing down and focusing is really powerful.
And you know what research shows is exactly the thing you just said, that men who kind of tune into their wives and maybe ask those same questions, what are you feeling at the moment? That partners who do that for their female partner really help those women tune in to their body, ground in their body. And women actually report greater sexual satisfaction and more connection, right? More emotional connection, which truthfully is what we are longing for in sex. We
Yeah.
do want that physical connection, but with it, we need that emotional connection, men and women.
Yeah.
But this is really what so many couples are lacking. We might even go through the mechanics of sex. We may even have orgasm. But some of my research showed that there's a small group of women who are regularly orgasming, but still feeling unsatisfied with their relationship. Or they may not be orgasming and still feel satisfied because that emotional connection is there. We need to pay attention to that and speak up for what it is we're lacking in our sexual encounters.
Yeah, and I love that point of having our partner know what is hard for us so that they can then connect with us in that way and like tell me what you're feeling or focus on what you're feeling or
Yeah.
don't worry if you're taking a long time. I'm here,
Yeah. Let's
like
take the pressure off of this. Let's get rid of the anxiety.
yes. Oh, I love that. You are a mom of 8 kids, is that correct?
9. Yes.
Wait, 9, that's right, 9.
9.
So you have a great experience of just your life experience plus all the research. What are some common things that stop women from being mindful during intimacy? We talked about a couple of things, but I'd just love for you to give us more examples because we're all going to be like, oh, yeah, yep, we've thought of that one. We've thought,
Yeah. Yeah, a really beautiful thing about women is that women are pretty other focused. We've been socialized that way, and maybe even biologically we're set up that way because we do nurture babies. We carry babies inside our bodies. And so we have this natural inclination often to think of others. And that's really a beautiful thing. But like I mentioned, that is something that men could learn from us to be more other focused. But again, we also need to balance that with a little self focus. So, sex is one of these occasions where we do need to recognize that here's a time for me to block the world out and slow down my mind, not be worrying about who's got to go to the dentist tomorrow or what we're cooking for dinner, but instead slow down and say, I need this. Not only do I need this, but my marriage needs this. And here's a time where I can just relax and kind of let go of the worries of the world and connect with my body and with my partner. And I think we underestimate the power of sex. And so sometimes we even make that less of a priority. Sex is pretty powerful in that it helps us to feel creative, more energetic, more bonded with our partner. And so when we neglect that part of taking care of ourselves, taking care of our marriage, it starts to wear on us. We start to feel depleted. And so here's a time where we need to recognize the importance of giving this attention. It's like sometimes we forget to drink enough water in the day. We're always going to regret that. So, this is also something we need to give attention to. And statistics show that about once a week seems to be a magic formula. And if it's once every 2 weeks, that's understandable. But give it the priority that you both are feeling the regularity that it needs in your relationship.
yes, when you get out of the habit of having sex as regularly, I feel like it's so much harder
Yeah.
to get into it again. And so just keeping it, someone on my podcast talked about it being cyclical. And I think that's so true that it can be
Yeah.
tricky to hop back into it, intimate experiences when you've been out of practice
Yes.
for a bit with it.
It's so true. Yeah.
So when these thoughts come, like, "Oh, did I empty the dishes?
Yeah.
Did I put the clothes in the dryer?" Or, all
Right.
these thoughts that can come when you're in the middle of a sexual encounter. What are some tips to help us move on and focus back in?
Thoughts like that, I would just try, use your best mindfulness skills and just let that thought go. But the thoughts that are really concerning often for women are, oh, is he looking at my roll of fat around my belly? Or Did I just make a noise that I'm embarrassed about or whatever? We start kind of criticizing ourselves. What's often helpful is for us to, if we can't just let that go, is to maybe bring that up with our partner and just say, I'm really struggling right here to feel present. Could we even take a break? And I know a lot of women like, oh my gosh, we can't like stop the arousal process. This is why I would suggest it, is because if our body is bringing something to our mind that we're struggling with, and we notice that maybe this is a regular intruder into our moments of intimacy, that might be something that the two of us need to talk about and work through. I remember when I was pregnant and I just felt lousy about my body. And so I finally just expressed that to my husband, and he's like, I really have never found you more attractive. I mean, you are growing this baby inside you. And truthfully, I know you may not feel your best, but please don't doubt that I feel this attraction to you. So that can alleviate some of these concerns or worries we have. Now, the other concern or worry that sometimes women have is that they feel a little hesitant in sex, or they don't feel like they're responding as well because there's an issue in their relationship that has gone unaddressed. Again, this is something that we need to, maybe even before sex goes too far into the process, just say, you know what? I really love you. I am attracted to you. I want to have sex. But you know that conversation we had the other night? I felt a little hurt, and just clear the air. What's interesting is as we do that, our bodies can respond better. We have actually seen this in research that even women who maybe had sexual trauma earlier in their life, if they can meditate, be more mindful and aware of what their body is telling them about these previous experiences or the trouble in their relationship, then it's just like clearing it out. And we're a conduit. Sexual energy really is energy. But when it's stopped with these negative thoughts or these troublesome aspects of our relationship, it hampers that energy. And so, the best way to improve your sexual desire, your sexual energy, your arousal process is by having a really high quality relationship where you can have extraordinarily clear, open communication. So much research has found that.
Oh, this is so good. And I think it's so interesting that we often separate our sexual relationship from our relationship with this
Yeah,
person. And
that's
it's like,
crazy.
wait a minute.
Nope.
This is the crux of all of it. Like,
Yeah,
if our relationship is suffering, our sex life can't be as connecting. Just back to what you were saying at the beginning of how sex can be so much deeper than just a physical response. Yes, that is a great part, but it can be an emotional, empowering aspect of our relationship.
yeah,
And I think what you just said was just so powerful, to recognize the fears coming up or the focus that we can't let go. And that's an invitation for connection, which is then going to move us into an ability to make sex
yeah,
so much more than just about my belly rolls or like
yeah.
it's about us as whole people.
And not only is it an invitation, but it's kind of something to celebrate, because if my fears or concerns can bubble up, rise to my attention, that indicates that I'm feeling like I'm in a safe enough place where I can address this. And I would say, in addition to sex being powerful, when sex is handled, we're honoring our body by saying, you know what, this is my concern. Can we clear the air on this? Can we find some resolution? In addition to sex being powerful, it can also be healing,
Mhm.
because we're kind of coming full circle and saying, I feel accepted and I'm going to share with you my body, my deepest emotions, and I'm going to receive your body and hear your deepest emotions. When we do that in love, not holding back, not having these problematic little hitches in our relationship, then we are fully sharing with each other the majesty of sex.
This is so, so good. What are some tips you would give for interruptions that happen? Because it's like, okay, I'm practicing, I'm trying to be mindful, and then my baby wakes up, or
Yep.
we've got some toddlers knocking on
Knocking
the
at the
door,
door.
or my teenagers calling. There's so many things that can come up. What are some tips to use mindfulness to help us get back in?
The more you practice mindfulness, the easier it's going to be to get back into the mood. We have to take care of kids when they're having some crisis or, cereal spilled down in the kitchen, and we've got to go tend to them. So we can sometimes employ our older children to maybe watch our kids for a while and maybe prepare so that we can have a little more alone time. But when we have interruptions, if we can just have a sense of humor with each other and recognize sometimes we are going to have to take a break and then come back to it, or maybe we don't even get to come back to it immediately, but sometimes that can increase the longing. We can say, darn it, but you know what? You're going to be on my mind. And I'm excited when the next opportunity arises that we get to be together. I remember hearing a story about a young couple who was in the throes of lots of little children, and it just felt like they never had a moment to themselves. So, because they were prioritizing sex and that part of their life, they decided, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but they decided to set the alarm for 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. They knew the kids could sleep in, and if they woke up, they would watch cartoons, and they would have uninterrupted, 3 or 4 hours that they could just not necessarily only have sex, but just connect with each other and talk about the things of the week. Let that relationship just be nurtured for a few minutes. So, yeah, I mean, we have to prioritize it, but we also have to have a sense of humor. And we have to recognize that these little creatures in our life need us at times that are inconvenient.
And I think that's so good too. Like, it's okay to be creative.
Yeah,
And just, I've even said, if 5 p.m. is good, that might seem like the worst time, but like put a show on for your kids, just like
exactly.
be great.
Yes.
And there's actually an Instagrammer and they talk fairly often about 1 a.m., 2 a.m. sex. Her
Yeah,
Style Fit Fatty is her name, but
it's real.
it's
It's real. And sometimes, depending on work schedules, you can maybe get kids off to school and then
yeah.
have a little hiatus where
Yes.
the house is empty for a half a second.
Right. Or come home on a lunch break. Like, I think we can be
Yes.
creative in the ways we prioritize, but it can be hard to think outside the box because I think a lot of us didn't go into marriage thinking we'd have to prioritize sex. We just thought it would kind of, be there.
Yeah, like the violins would be playing in the background and the music would swell, and suddenly it was like in the movies. And it's not.
It is
It's so
not.
chaotic sometimes.
It really is. What are some tips for using mindfulness? Because, especially as women, you have to have consistent stimulation on your erogenous zones, especially the
Yeah.
clitoris. And when that stimulation moves or stops, it can just be like, wow, I am back to ground zero. What are some tips you would give to use mindfulness during those really frustrating times when you feel like you're getting close to orgasm or feeling a lot of great arousal and then suddenly it plummets and it's so frustrating?
I would say that as women, we probably need to take a little bit of the pressure off of orgasm and really just stay present in the moment. Like, you know what? My husband's touching me right now and it feels good. Or we are just sharing this beautiful moment of an embrace. And this is lovely. Too often as women, because sometimes orgasm can be a little elusive, we feel this pressure like, ooh, I'm very close. I'm going to just rev up. I'm going to just get over the hump. And sometimes that actually backfires on us. And we find ourselves just like you're talking about, like suddenly we just lost it. I think we need to recognize. I love some work by Metz and McCarthy. They talk about good enough sex. that sometimes things don't go as we planned, and you're describing that. So, do we have a backup plan for when that happens? Maybe what we do is we just take the pressure off and we say, let's just have some pillow talk, or let's maybe just touch each other, or move to massage, or watch a movie. It doesn't have to be any one outcome. But I think we need to realize that, yeah, that's going to be a normal part of sex. And it doesn't mean that was a failure. That was actually a beautiful time that we just got to spend with each other. And there's another time that we can work for. The other thing I was going to say is that oftentimes women are feeling a little bit rushed through the whole process, even in foreplay. What men can do to kind of help that out, we know that women who report being kissed often outside of sex, who are touched often outside of sex, a hug, a warm embrace, just a nice little touch on our shoulder or squeezing our hand. When women have a lot of non-sexual touch, they are the ones who can respond a lot better once we do move into sexual touch. So take a little inventory. How often are we showing affection for each other outside of sex?
And that's huge because so many women talk about, I'm nervous to show affection because my husband's going to want sex. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important to recognize that we need affection and sexual types of affection, like kisses and hugs. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I kind of think that there's a lot more than just sex for sexual affection.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
need that type of touch outside of sex. And so to talk about that and be like, okay, this is a day we're not having sex. Let's lean into just touching and get into the practice of that sexual touch that isn't leading to sex.
And even educating our husbands on the fact that they need this too.
Yeah.
They need to have that affectionate touch, that nice, just graze of our hand that says, I'm thinking about you. You matter to me. That needs to be a regular part of our diet. And so then when we have the opportunities for more sexual interactions, we've already laid that foundation. We've already primed the pump so we can take off in moving into more sexual interactions.
Which I think is so beautiful because I think asking for sex can be a way that our spouse is actually, if it's a man, right? Like we're talking the man asking, it's like,
Yeah.
I want to connect with you. And I think it's so important to recognize that we can be connecting in sexual ways throughout the day that isn't just always waiting until you are sexually intimate. And I think
And
that is
that's really reassuring to both people.
mhm.
If throughout the day I'm getting the message, I love you, I desire you, you matter to me, those are really important messages.
Yes. And for our kids too. To
Yes,
help
our
them
kids are
feel safe.
watching.
They're like,
Yeah.
mom and dad like each
Yeah, they
other.
might even like say, ooh,
Ooh.
but deep inside they're saying like, there's something there. My parents dig
Mhm.
each other.
Yes, which is so, so good. What are some ways that mindfulness can help with anxiety? And women talk about, especially postpartum, it can be hard to start getting back into intercourse and more sexual touch after giving birth because it can feel scary of like, is this going to hurt?
Yes.
I need to be aware and stop if it's hurting, but also I'm just nervous because I don't know what it's going to feel like. What are some ways to use mindfulness to help with that anxiety?
The really nice thing about meditating outside of sex or, any other experience is that it kind of helps us become more aware of what it is we are maybe anxious about. So we can process it long before the time that we get into a sexual interaction. And so then we may be able to talk about, you know what, I had a little trauma during birth. Maybe I had an episiotomy. I'm really nervous about this. Talk about it with my partner so we can take it slow. Pain should never be occurring in sex. And so, if there is pain, maybe we need to do a little vaginal massage, or maybe we need to pay attention to the perineum, or take penetration a little slower. Or maybe our first few times of being intimate with our partner after we've delivered and now we're ready to engage in more sexual connection. Maybe we need to just say, we're not going to have penetrative sex. We're going to just get back into the routine of really being connected to each other. Maybe we'll have outer course, or maybe we'll just do some oral sex or just some cuddling, whatever it is. We don't need to push so that one or the other partner is feeling nervous or pain or anxiety. We need to just slow it down and really talk about the goal of sex is connection, not orgasm. And too often that's what we're thinking is that, well, we've got to move towards orgasm. No, we don't. Orgasm is a really fun, beautiful byproduct of being close with each other, of feeling that pleasure with just being next to each other, connecting, feeling arousal.
So good, because it is. It's just we can slow down and focus on the connection. And I know I've been in that where it's like, okay, we gotta like get to
Yeah,
orgasm or get
it's so
him
easy.
off, or and it's like, no, like this is about us connecting. And that's such a
Yeah,
good mindset shift to take the pressure off and just focus on what is
yeah.
gonna bind us together.
And one really nice thing to do during sex is to kind of reflect on what brought us here. Why did we fall in love? And what are some of the challenges that we've overcome to still be together, to still be desiring each other in this way? That's pretty powerful and helps us really focus in on, gosh, I just love you. I really am so grateful that we have just a few minutes to express this deep love we have for one another.
This is so good. As we're closing up, could you just give some tips for women to start using mindfulness to help them as they're connecting sexually with their partner? And especially if you could talk to people who aren't familiar with mindfulness. We've used that term a lot. Like, how do you practice mindfulness and what does that look like? And what is mindfulness? If you could kind of walk us through how to start practicing that.
Mindfulness, you don't have to have fancy clothes or go to a class or anything like that. It's as simple as taking in a breath and maybe even counting to four. Take in a big breath, count to four. Exhale, count to four. And the reason we focus on our breath is because our breath is always with us. That designates when we were alive as a baby and when we die. Breath, this 4-second inhale and 4-second exhale, will be with us our entire life. So here's where I can anchor on my body and slow my mind down. Just let go of whatever's plaguing your mind. And some people have described it like watching clouds go by in the sky. You're going to have thoughts. That's what our brain is designed to do, have thoughts, work through problems, think. But we don't have to focus on it. As I'm taking my breath in, exhaling, as those thoughts start jumbling around in my mind, I just notice them. I'm like, I'm thinking about that, but I'm not going to feed it. I'm just going to focus on my breath. I'm going to keep returning to how do I feel being in my body? Do I notice that my shoulders are a little tense? Okay, I'm going to relax those a little. Take a breath, exhale. I'm noticing I feel a little tension in my neck. Relax, take a breath, exhale. It's that simple. It's just tuning into your body, trying to give your brain a break, a little bit of a timeout. For a few minutes, try not to think so much. And that really helps you become more aware of what it is you're feeling in your life. Just that short little activity will start blessing so many areas of your life.
And I've definitely found I've gotten better with practice, but I also still have days that I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I can't focus on anything."
Yeah,
And
sure.
just to know that it's a process and there are gonna be days where like, "Man, I feel so mindful." And then other days, it's
Yeah.
like, "I can't."
It's a muscle. It's a muscle that you're exercising. And there are days when I struggle with that too. And I remember one meditation guide saying, on those days when you struggle, notice why it is you're struggling. And that's probably going to be something you could meditate about. I noticed that it was my children. My children were coming to my mind. One of my children was having a struggle with, this or that. And this meditation guide said, those are generally things that you value. Don't even discount or judge what it is you're struggling about. Notice it and say, that's probably something that's very important to me.
That's so good. This has been so awesome. You really should record like a meditation podcast or something. Just as you were talking, I was like, oh, yep, release my shoulders.
Yep, I'm stressed. Oh, thank you, Ariel.
Thank you. Where can people find you, Shalom?
You can come to my website, which is just Chelom Leavitt, ChelomLeavitt.com. Or I'm also on Instagram. I just love throwing out great ideas about research and how we can individually and as couples come together and create more connection.
It's been so great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, isn't Dr. Leavitt just amazing? I really think the meaning of sex is connection. And I hope that after listening to this episode, you feel empowered that you can create a meaningful sex life. As women, like she talked about, it can be a struggle to be mindful. Our minds are going in so many different directions, but we can help our spouse recognize that this is a gift that men usually have. We can ask them to help us start to develop more mindfulness, especially in our sexual relationship. I've even found recently I love romance novels, proper romances, clean romances. And when I am in a sexual encounter, thinking about how they might describe a kiss or a touch in one of the books that I read helps me to be more mindful. And so you can find these little tricks and tips that you can use to help you learn to be more mindful. Another one is asking your spouse to describe what they are feeling, and you in turn talking about and describing what you are feeling. I also loved when Dr. Leavitt talked about clearing the air. Our bodies hold in what we're feeling. And if there is something in your relationship that's making you feel disconnected or like you are angry or unhappy or sad in your relationship, bring that up, clear the air, talk about it. Bringing in that piece of connection is going to help you be able to be more present in your body and make sex be more connecting, because what happens in the bedroom is only one part of the connection that we have. If we aren't connecting outside of the bedroom and talking about our relationship and the things that hurt us or the things we want to improve, that connection in the bedroom is going to be stunted. So we need both of those things to create the connection that we desire. And another part of that is creating moments of touch throughout your day. Kissing, hugging, touching, making these more non-sexual touches constant in your relationship so that when you decide and when you're both ready to move into the bedroom, you are primed. You're ready, that you have the foundation set of touch. And of course, we need that emotional connection as well. When you have that foundation set, then it's going to be much easier to move into the mood to be sexual with your spouse and to feel deeply connected in that. I hope that this episode gave you so much hope for your sex life and the power it can have to bind you to your spouse. And I love how Dr. Leavitt talked about not allowing orgasm to be the focus of sex. The goal of sex is connection. And when we focus on being present, being together, connecting emotionally, connecting physically, and making that the goal, focus on what is pleasurable, and it will come easier because we are not focused on orgasm as the goal. We're focused on connection. And yes, I do believe orgasm is important, and we need to work to know what feels good and practice what feels good for both of us and make sure that as a part of our sexual encounters. But the goal is to feel deeply connected. And pleasure, I believe, is the means to that goal. In order to be deeply connected, we have to know each other in an intimate way. So this week, I want you to start talking with your spouse how you can shift the focus of sex from whatever it has been to a focus on deep connection, because that is going to be the key to making your sex life more meaningful and more fulfilling for both of you. As always, thanks for talking love. Thank you to all of you who listen and join me on this journey, and to our Ladies Talking Love team who make the podcast possible. Thanks to our sound wizard, Kimberly Demers, and our miscellaneous task whiz, Melissa Havertz.